the discussion on postmodernism. Actually, the first part or the point at which these two movements differ, we saw in the case of fragmentation or their approach, the difference in their approach towards fragmentation. Right. That means one is lamenting fragmentation. They are doing, they are practicing, they are taking that, they are making use of fragmentation in their writings, but they are not really happy about it. But what about postmodernism? They are not that unhappy, they are not pessimistic about it, they celebrate what they are doing. That is the difference between these two, because that in that case you have to note down fragmentation as a technique is used by both. That's why the writings of modernist movement or modernist time, writings under the category of modernism and postmodernism both hold many of the features unanimously. Their ways, their approach towards subject matter theme, you can note down a lot of similarities there, but the difference is where the way they take that, the way they approach the innovations, experimentation, experiments, they try with different kinds of art forms. That is the difference. Okay, in that case fragmentation one is happy about, the other is not happy about, or one is lamenting over fragmentation, the other is celebrating it. Now to the new points, the discussion for this day. A second and related difference between the two is also a matter of tone or attitude. That is the next point. Tone or attitude. How do they differ in these two, in this aspect? An important aspect of modernism was a fierce asceticism which found the over-elaborate art forms of the 19th century deeply offensive and repulsive. See here, with the modernism itself. Modernism, definitely you have to locate in 20th century, if not at the later stage, but at the beginning stage, initial stage itself. With the World War and all, you can note down the introduction of modernism, the concept and its application in different kinds of art forms. The 19th century art forms, the elaborate art forms and all, they wanted to oppose, they wanted to stay away from practicing such ways. That's why they felt it deeply offensive and repulsive. Offensive and repulsive. Means they didn't want to promote it any longer. That is bringing an art form, writing with a lot of content, a lot of pages, your ideas, you expressing your ideas in number of pages, in number of lines. Where modernism, you know, the tendency itself is to minimizing. It is their way. So they didn't want to promote the 19th century the expressive way to make it more elaborate, in the mode of elaborating, saying things in a roundabout way. They didn't want to promote it any longer. So with the modernism itself, this difference comes. Here this asceticism has one of its most characteristic and striking manifestations in the pronouncement of modernist architects. In architecture, it came visibly. It came visibly in architectural forms itself. You please note down here, such as Adolf Loos's proclamation that decoration is a crime. You know, at one point or other, even now we can see people who are much fascinated about decorating their homes, having a lot of illumination, light here and there without having any sense of purpose. Just think about your home. One maximum of 2 lights are enough. But you know how much people spend on this illumination, different kinds of lights, home decoration as a whole. So that is the way they began to pronounce, began to proclaim that decoration is a crime. Why do you go for unlikely decoration? You should not do that. Make it more simple. Don't complicate things. So in art also later at least you can see the reflection. Oh, many other thoughts or many other thoughts, like a house is a machine for living in. Think about that. A house is a machine for living in. Why do you love your home? Why do you love your house? It's just a building too. It's take it as a shelter. Why do you spend too much on that? Decorating, renovating. You might have seen people. No, when you look from the outside, it's okay, fine. What's wrong with that particular structure? But all of a sudden they start restructuring it, renovating it. If there is some damage or something, let them go for that. But what about the usual way? It's not like that. People do it for the satisfaction of their aesthetic sense. Sometimes just for the sake of making it more luxurious. So modernism began to say things opposing to this, or they wanted to demote all this. They didn't want to promote these things, these ways, and they wanted to make it more simplified, less expensive. That's why decoration is a crime, a house is a machine for living in. And then these pronouncements resulted in the shoebox and carbuncle buildings. Later on, with their proclamation, people began to think differently, so that there was a point of time where large buildings, luxurious buildings began to be part of something negative, began to be disapproved. So carbuncle buildings means very small, shoebox and carbuncle buildings, making it very simple. To look from the outside, you don't see much elaborate structures, but okay, inside there will be some better facility. But you are not making it more of a unlikely sophisticated structures, decoration. You are trying to avoid, because modernism, people began to think in that way as well. You cannot say that all the people, they sold their homes, their houses, built in large model, large sized buildings. They sold and made it more carbuncle. No, but at least they began to think in a different way. Yeah, why? That's what they say. That's the right. When I say this, when I read out this for you, you also may start. At least 10 of you may start thinking, yes. Why do you? It's just a shelter. House is a machine for living in. What else? What other purpose does it serve? Why should you spend much time on that? Much time and money on that. So this is the way which have generated such hatred and opposition, particularly through the 1980s. It means even a later time, postmodernist time, if you want to locate. Particularly, so this movement, the ideas to be disseminated or taken for granted by people of different regions, different sectors, different class. It takes time. But still, these proclamations did have much effect on the thinking power of people. So that's how it becomes fashionable. Small buildings becoming fashionable. There was a time when people preferred only concrete buildings. But nowadays, you know how we are going back to time, back to the traditional ways. Like some people are, even when building new home, they prefer this roof as tile. Old glass building, the whole walls with glass, different other materials, So this is the way people begin to think differently with the certain ideas disseminated, ideas communicated at different points of time. And but the high idealism they represent retains its power to move. That means they have been ideal in many regards. They have been holding a lot of ideals, like what we say is right, what others say is not right. So there was a sticking on to something what they said, what they thought. That is something problematic, somewhat problematic as far as a movement, combined collective movement is concerned. Let us see what happened to modernism afterwards. These changes occurred with the modernism itself. That's what we tried to communicate. Now, the same refined asceticism is a kind of, you are very strict about, you are very particular about sticking on to what you say, what you think. There is seen in literature in the minimalism, which, for instance, shrinks poems to narrow columns of 2-word lines. Now you know haikus, communicating different ideas, unlike in the past. I told it already. In the past, if you go and submit your poem in 2 or 3 lines, no one would have accepted it to be a poem even. At least this much lines in this and this rhyme pattern and rhyme scheme, meter, many other ideas given by prosody. If you observe that, we are ready to take that, we are ready to appreciate your creativity. Otherwise, you just throw it away. It's not even a poem. This was the way it was taken. Everywhere, certain decisions had been there. Certain attributes, certain ideals have been there. But now we are trying to come out of that. At least change the way the appreciation happens, the way our interpretations take place, where you are trying to shrink your poems to narrow columns of 2-word lines, registering rigorously sparse, pared down observations. Just think about in a station metro by Ezra Pound. Just 1-2 line, in 1 or 2 lines, the maximum idea is communicated. Not just with one poem, many images poems, in 1 or 2 lines they communicate the matter. Just go in search of that poem and see how it is communicated, how he communicates that idea. It's images, that is word picture. So that nothing much is needed to communicate the idea, to express the idea. You need more lines where each line the lines, each of them, they fail to communicate something higher. Well, only after combining too much of lines you can communicate an idea, you can give a word picture. But here it's something different. Imagism, expressionism, cubism. In different kinds of arts, they began to bring forth something entirely new, and in literature you can see this minimalism of shrinking poems to narrow columns of 2-word lines, registering rigorously sparse, pared down observations. Or in the drama of Samuel Beckett, in which a play may be reduced to a running time of 30 minutes. You have a play titled, modernist play titled Breath. There is nothing but just a deep breath. From that, out of that they try to communicate something. Or in 2 or 3 minutes they present some idea. You just think about short films and all. That's possible. But there was a time when people were very particular about having a minimum this kind of a length, unity of time, unity of place, unity of action, or epic, the length of an epic, the lines, the number of lines of sonnet. There was time when used to stick on to such particulars, features. But modernism is trying to bring something, modernism or postmodernism, they are trying to bring a change in this attitude. So you just see the running time of a drama. In 30 minutes you are presenting a drama, you are communicating an idea in front of the audience. Whether staged or whether read out, you get something. That's what they assure. That's what they mean. If I don't get anything out of the 30-minute play, that's not you cannot blame the writer. If at least one person can get an idea, a theme, an interpretation, that art form is valid. It's just about your interpretative quality. You didn't spend much time or spend effort to get the meaning. That's all is the meaning of that. Means sometimes it's visibly available. Certain themes, just think about some movies. There is no complication at all. Just at one sitting, at one very casual leisure mode of watching, you can get the idea, you can get idea about the characters, the events, the plot as a whole, the theme. But certain other movies, especially of this time, very complicated. At a surface level that may be communicating one idea. At a deeper level, those movies have entirely different ideas. Some loopholes those are noted down by the interpreters. So that is the way difference in approach towards art, towards writing, all those bring something entirely new. So here, no set and language, that is no set and language which is sparse in that extreme. That means it is some kind of scattered mode of representation, whether it is of characters, their dialogues, their representation as a whole. It's almost like scattered. Just with a leisure mode of watching or viewing, you won't get anything. Your brain has much work to do if you have to get the proper meaning of that place or writings, any kind of art forms. If they do it very deliberately to make it more sparse, scattered, fragmented, your effort is needed. Then it is demanded by the writings which are very obvious, very clear, characters are not at all complicated. But here with the modernist artistic tendency itself, you can see this difference in creating, interpreting art forms. Now, by contrast, again, postmodernism rejects the distinction between high and popular art. That is another thing. In art, if you are taking, just wait, postmodernism rejects the distinction between high and popular art. It is a contrast. That means when they make a distinction, when modernists make a distinction or mark down such distinctions, they say that this is high art. The other kind is popular art, low art. Instead of that, they use popular art. Popular art means art of the common people, readily available to everyone. Other one is that of the elitist class. So that is a very problematic thing about them. But here, postmodernism, they say that such distinction is not at all needed. Because modernism believes in excess, the gaudiness and the bad taste mixture of qualities. That is, which was important in modernism, and believes in excess, in gaudiness and in bad taste mixtures of qualities. Bad taste within quotes means what was taken to be bad taste by modernism or any other elitist tendencies, they say that you can easily mix those up. You don't have to be worried about mixing up these qualities. You bring different kinds of artworks together. You bring poetry in prose, prose in poetry. You make poetry prose-like, you make prose poetry-like. There is no problem at all. You mix it very casually and freely. Why are you worried about doing that? That is their question. They want to be very free in their approach towards art forms. So, it disdains the modernist asceticism. That is the problem. Modernists, they were elitists. Their approach towards art was somewhat problematic in the mode of being very ascetic. Means, you just think about the bourgeoisist ways, the elitist ways, where you distinguish people on behalf of their high birth, low birth, belonging to high caste, low caste, being rich or poor. All these are problematic things. So these distinctions you could see in the case of approach towards art forms as well. But postmodernism says that you cheerfully mix all these things in the same building, bits and pieces from different architectural periods. Don't worry, you mix all those from different architectural periods, points, different art forms. Why are you worried about doing that? A mock Georgian pediment here, a tongue-in-cheek classical Rococo. So that means something from that period, Georgian period, something from classical period, means entirely different time periods. Entirely different time periods. But you mix all those things. Why are you worried about that mixing up? So here, a similar postmodernist edifice in literature would be the Martian poetry of writers like Craig Green or Christopher Reid, where bizarrely colorful mixtures of imagery, viewpoint and vocabulary jostle on a surface which seems happy to be nothing but surface. Just now, it's about Martian poetry. It's very beautiful to read actually. You just go and search in some of the internet in some internet sites, or you can read and you can enjoy reading that. I'm sure. You might have watched the movie PK. Right, PK movie. The way an alien, an extraterrestrial being, when the person comes to earth, we think that whatever we do on earth is very great, to be appreciated, very logical. But the movie portrays the insensibilities behind whatever things we do in a very beautiful manner. The insensibility between whichever things we do in the mode of accumulating wealth, amount of the inconsistencies in the belief systems, the many other things that movie criticizes. But you can see a reflection of this Martian poetry, the concept of this Martian poetry. That means some Martian, Mars is Mars, the planet. Chova, Mars. The writers assume that a being from Mars comes to, some beings from Mars come to Earth, see the way human beings behave, their ways of living, their approach towards life, and they're wondering at the insensibilities. Sometimes at one poem, the title looked like A Martian Sends Postcard Home. Means the Martian is here now on visit to Earth. He is sending postcard to home, means he is sending that to Mars about the people of Earth. His wonder, the wondering incidents, the different experience he or she faces here, that is written and sent, and that is written as a poem. Martian poetry as a particular genre. You talk about metaphysical poetry, romantic poetry, Now in modernism, in postmodernist time, you can see this Martian poetry as a type of poetry, that is a concept, based on a common theme, where you can see this colorful mixtures of imagery, viewpoint, very objective, that is as an outsider the Martian is writing. As wondering at the insensibility of the people on earth. So that is expressing to the greatest possible extent about the problems on earth, the criticism in a very deep manner. With in-depth quality, you can give the criticism, the way you feel, the incongruities of people, the way we behave, all this. When we read it, we feel, oh, we are like this. Oh. When an outsider who are not very familiar about our ways sees this, oh, they feel like this, very problematic it is. That is the way these forms communicate ideas, viewpoint, and vocabulary jostle on a surface which seems happy to be nothing but surface. When you look from outside, it's just surface, but with a lot of meanings inside. It's very name to look at from the surface, but very deep inside out actually, without the depths of significance which literary education trains us to seek out. When you talk about poetry in terms of the rules of prosody, you cannot see such things in a Martian poetry. The essential qualities or the features that you demand in poetry writing, you cannot always see in Martian poetry or haiku. But those try to communicate something very important. Very important. That's the main idea. Okay? Nothing could be further in spirit from that austere modernist asceticism. That is the main thing. Nothing could be further in spirit from that austere modernist asceticism. That means no longer, after this cheerful mixing, the idea given by postmodernism to make it more free and free plus allowing maximum of flexibility. These concepts, these ideas, when began to be allowed in creativity, interpretation, many other art forms, you began to be very comfortable in expressing your ideas through art of different kinds, not just in writings. Okay, so that's all with the differences getting listed out between modernism and postmodernism. Most of the techniques they use are the same, but the way they approach their own creative writings, their own creativity, after making use of such innovative techniques, the writing devices, are somewhere different. The approach is different because one is happy about what they are doing, what they are writing, what they are creating. With the postmodernism, modernists, they are even after using all these techniques, bringing all these differences, promoting all these differences, still they are unhappy about what they are doing. We are only left out with these options. That's why we wanted to do it in an entirely different way. But this world is already out of the control, out of the concept of harmony, peace, consistency. So no longer we can stick on to such artistic methods, artistic mode of creativity. So this is the way the difference between, actually that is under the title what is postmodernism, what is modernism. We are trying to distinguish between these two terms. So that is the first title, but from one point we can note down these to be exact differences between modernism and postmodernism. Whether it is about fragmentation, their approach, the difference in their approach, or in their tone and tone. That mainly about the second and related difference between the two is a matter of tone or attitude. As a whole, it is about attitude, the difference in their attitude towards art. Okay, yes. Next main title is Landmarks in Postmodernism. You can see three names there. Name of the major figures, landmarks in postmodernism. Now you know how these are different, how it is not just a continuity, how postmodernism is not just a continuity in time, but many differences. At least even this, this is the difference in attitude or approach. That is a very important difference. Because if you are confident about doing one thing, one is not confident about doing one thing, the other is very confident about doing one thing. The impact will be reflected in your writings, in whatever you are doing, not just in writing. Just think about the way you take food. You have your favorite curries for lunch. The speed with which you eat, the enthusiasm with which you eat is entirely different on a day when you don't have a better curry, better lunch, better meal. So that day you just take it for the sake of taking. You're not happy about it. The way you consume food, that will be entirely different. Your facial expression may be different. It almost looks like taking it for someone else, or on behalf of some compulsion, essential need, that's all. But sometimes you're very enthusiastic about taking food on a day when you are having very good meal of your favorite dish or something. So this is the way modernism and postmodernism, even though they are taking all those, that again you can think about. Two people are given the same meal. One is a modernist, one is a postmodernist. Take it as a metaphor. Only these dishes are available. So modernist eats the way I told right now, that is with all kind of frustration. Anyway, that person is taking that food, but not at all in a happy way. Anyway, I have to take something, so I'm taking this. I'm eating. But the postmodernist eats it with all enthusiasm. Now, hope it is clear now. The same way, instead of dish and all, you just think about fragmentation, many other new techniques given equally to them. One person is using it or making use of those in his or her writings with a kind of frustration. The other one is as the way the other person eats lunch with all enthusiasm, takes it, makes use of these techniques with all the happiness, or wholehearted happiness, confidence. That's all with this is the main idea that I tried to communicate. With this metaphor, I hope it's truly clear. Shall we move? Yes, just wait. Before moving to the next topic, I would like to ask you about something on this topic. Landmarks in postmodernism. Habermas, Lyotard and Baudrillard. You can see the names, Habermas, Lyotard and Baudrillard. That's landmarks in postmodernism, and under that title you can see the names of a few people, theorists. Let us see how they contributed to the movement postmodernism with their ideas, with their new techniques, whatever. Major movement in the history of postmodernism is the influential paper Modernity an incomplete project delivered by the contemporary German theorist Jürgen Habermas, the first name you see here, Jürgen Habermas in 1980s. Modernity, an incomplete project. So after modernity you see postmodernism, and he gives the lecture or the paper, he submits the paper titled Modernity, an incomplete project. What does he mean by that? Let us see. For Habermas, the modern period begins with the Enlightenment. It's very important to note down the details regarding Enlightenment. The period of about 100 years from the mid-17th to the mid-18th century. Mid-17th to the mid-18th century. When a new faith arose in the power of reason to improve human society. 2000 plus means 21st century. That means you have to calculate, you just think about the years, that's mid 17th century. Means 1650 to mid 18th century means 1750s. That is the time period where you can locate the beginning of Enlightenment, where Habermas talks about the exact point at which modern period as well begins. For Habermas, as far as his idea is concerned, his thought is concerned, modern period begins with the Enlightenment. When a new faith arose in the power of reason to improve human society. New faith to arose in the power of reason to improve human society. Just think about Enlightenment. It's a new awakening. Means you are giving your confident about the power of human beings to think, perform actions, do something for the betterment of your own sake as well as for the society. When you think about Enlightenment, there is a chance for you to be confused that it is going to give maximum freedom for the human intellect. No, this is freedom with a responsibility only. When a new generation person hears about the term freedom or the concept of freedom, that is entirely different from the freedom communicated by Enlightenment project. Means power of reason to improve human society. You are given freedom to educate, to be educated, to be professional, not for your own personal benefit or not for your own personal benefit only, but for the improvement of the society. Human society. So you are given freedom with a kind of responsibility only. It doesn't mean that you can have a leisure life of your own preference and choice with the education, with the kind of professional exposure you get from the society, from the government. No, that is not at all the idea that is communicated here. Such ideas are expressed or embodied in the philosophy of Kant, Immanuel Kant in Germany, Voltaire and Diderot in France, and Locke and Hume in Britain. From different countries, you could see the impact of this thinking, the new movement, Enlightenment thought coming to change the face of human society. That's how education, more importance, more emphasis on education and all began to be introduced began to be introduced. But you think that yes, human beings are given more importance, prominence for their personality you are going to give, their individuality is going to be appreciated. But At that point also, there is a freedom with a lot of conditions. In Britain, the term the age of reason, that is the important thing. In Britain, the term the age of reason, it was expressed with that the whole enlightenment idea got expressed under the phrase the age of reason. Means you are giving importance to reason. You are going to approach or evaluate the people around you with the idea that you are reasonable or you have to be reasonable. So that again there is no freedom as such. You cannot behave the way you want to. Just think about you being in a class. Or you join a campus, and you have the idea about all the kinds of, you talk about campus life, you have your own concepts that you got from some movies. But when you come to attend the classes or come to campus, you know that some kind of freedom is there, but still there is of a restricted kind. Whichever campus you go, you cannot go and do whatever you want to, just saying that I am a grown-up person, I am matured, I have my own freedom. So that is the way you are, and again you are responsible as a grown-up child. The same way, enlightenment or age of reason, when you talk about enlightenment freedom in terms of reason, you have more restrictions already imposed upon you. Don't think that it is a freedom without restrictions. So Habermas talks about that time itself as the beginning of modernism. Let us see why he does say so. Because we know in art and all, in a very expressive manner, modernist tendency came to forefront after the aftermath of the world wars or during World War. Writers or artists began to think very seriously about the importance of bringing something new or bringing a change in the face of art with the impact left out by World War itself. Otherwise it was going, the time period before that and the kinds of artworks, art forms. Just think about British literature itself. Victorian writings, Victorian novels, or even romantic writings. It was not fragmented at all. Though romantic writings promoted a lot of freedom for individual expression, still those were not fragmented as the way you look at a war field where you have scattered dead bodies, scattered buildings, ruins of buildings, the dead bodies of people. That began to be the daily life picture of people, daily life picture of the whole world after the World War itself. That's how the importance of bringing such elements in art began to be noted down. Otherwise it was okay, it was going on in the way they wanted to, or at least the people of privilege wanted to go on with the lifestyle. At least a basic financial sound, they were financially sound, they could meet their daily life needs. So this way it went on, but with World War everything changed. But Habermas talks about Habermas is talking about enlightenment or age of reason began in the mid 16th to 17th century, this mid 17th to mid 18th century itself. You see here, Habermas talks about this beginning, this modern period beginning with the enlightenment. That is about mid 17th and mid 18th. in between. That is the time period when enlightenment ideas flourished. The so-called enlightenment project is the fostering of this belief. That part we will talk about later. So I would like to stop here with the British term for enlightenment idea, that's the age of reason. We will talk about enlightenment in the coming session only. Okay, so that's all with the time. Thank you so much for listening.